I once booked an Airbnb by myself in Arizona for a job interview. Since the drive was long, I decided to make a small trip out of it. The place I chose wasn't exactly luxurious, but it was half the price of any nearby hotel. It sat at the end of a dead, secluded road surrounded by desert. The backyard opened into miles of empty land, with nothing but dry wind and silence. It looked peaceful, at least online. I brought my laptop with me to work remotely during the days. The first night was quiet. I cooked, answered emails, and watched the sunset from the porch. It was the kind of calm that almost feels unnatural. My interview was scheduled for Tuesday morning. So, on Monday night, around 9 p.m., I sat in the small living room, going through possible interview questions on my laptop. Everything was still, until I heard it. A sound. Not a knock. A tap. It came from the window just to my left, soft, quick, like the tip of a finger touching glass. I froze. My head turned before I could stop it, but the window showed nothing. Just blackness outside. For a few seconds, I debated whether to check. The rational part of my brain said it was probably a bug. Arizona's got plenty of those. But the other part of me, the part that suddenly felt the weight of being completely alone, told me to look anyway. So I did. Nothing. Just darkness, stretching out into the desert. I told myself I was being paranoid and went back to my laptop. But that tiny sound, that single tap, sat in the back of my mind for the rest of the night. The next morning, I pushed the thought aside and focused on the interview. It actually went well, better than I expected. I left feeling confident, relieved, even proud. Afterward, I grabbed lunch at a diner, explored the nearby town, and stopped by a few shops just to kill time. By the time I got back to the Airbnb, the sun was setting again, painting the desert red and gold. I remember thinking how peaceful everything looked, so still it almost felt staged. I made dinner, poured myself a drink, and later curled up on the couch to watch Breaking Bad on Netflix. It was around 10:30 when it happened again. Tap. One sharp sound against the same window. I paused the show immediately. This time, I knew it wasn't an insect. It was too deliberate, too human. I moved closer to the glass, trying to peer outside, but the darkness beyond the porch light was too thick. My pulse quickened as I stepped back. I grabbed my phone and hesitated by the front door before deciding to check. Outside, the air was cold and unnervingly still. No cars, no movement, nothing but the quiet stretch of desert. I went around to the back porch, hoping to spot some animal or maybe a loose branch tapping in the wind. But the second I stepped outside, I heard it, a faint click. Not from the house. From out there, somewhere beyond the light. It wasn't mechanical. It was a human sound, someone clicking their tongue against the roof of their mouth. It echoed faintly, followed by silence. My chest tightened. I scanned the darkness, every bush now looking like it could be hiding someone. Then, another click. Louder this time. I looked toward the sound, and my heart dropped. There was a figure, standing just far enough that I could barely make out their shape. Dark clothes, still as a statue. Watching. I took a few steps toward them before freezing. My voice came out shaky when I called. "You're on private property. I'm calling the cops." The figure tilted its head slightly, then walked away. Not ran, walked. Slowly, calmly, until it disappeared into the dark. I stood there for a long time, staring into the emptiness before finally going back inside and locking every door and window. That night, I barely slept. The next night, I told myself I was overreacting. It could have been a hiker, a neighbor, maybe even someone who took a wrong turn. That's what I wanted to believe. I spent most of the evening inside, doors locked, curtains drawn. Around 11 p.m., I got into bed and put on Breaking Bad again, trying to distract myself. The familiar sounds of dialogue and background noise helped, until I remembered what had happened the night before. I watched 2 episodes before deciding to sleep. Everything was quiet. The air conditioner hummed softly. For the first time since arriving, I started to relax. Then I turned off the light. Within seconds, click. It wasn't from outside this time. It was inside the room. I froze. My eyes darted toward the closet door, which I'd left cracked open just a sliver. The sound had come from there. Another faint click, like someone pressing their tongue against the roof of their mouth. Slow, deliberate, close. The rational part of me shut down. My instincts took over. I bolted upright, grabbed my phone, and sprinted out of the room barefoot, not even looking back. Outside, I jumped into my car and locked the doors, heart hammering so hard it hurt. The house loomed in my headlights, still and quiet, like nothing was wrong. I called 911. My voice was shaking as I told the dispatcher there was someone inside my Airbnb. They told me to stay in the car and keep the doors locked. Minutes dragged on like hours before a police cruiser pulled into the driveway. I met them outside, still trembling, as we went back into the house together. Inside, the air felt heavy. Every creak made me flinch. The officers checked the entire property, closets, bathroom, under the bed, even the attic hatch. Nothing. No forced entry, no signs anyone had been there. But I knew what I'd heard. I knew that sound had come from inside that closet. After the officers left, I stood there in the living room, feeling smaller than ever inside that tiny Airbnb. Their flashlights had cut through every corner, and yet they found nothing. No footprints, no unlocked windows, no hint that anyone had been there. But I couldn't stay another minute. I shoved my laptop, clothes, and toiletries into my duffel bag as fast as I could. My hands were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped my phone twice. I didn't even bother folding anything. I just wanted out. As I carried my bag outside, I stopped at the doorway for a second and looked back. The house was dark except for the glow of the kitchen light, flickering slightly, like a dying bulb. I don't know why, but that flicker felt like the house was watching me leave. I got into my car, locked the doors again, and drove straight to the nearest hotel 20 minutes away. Even once I was in my new room, I kept thinking about what could have been in that closet. The next morning, I called Airbnb support and told them everything. They contacted the host, who claimed not to know anything about it. He said no one else had access, no spare keys, and that he hadn't been to the property in over a week. Still, the more I thought about it, the more I was convinced it had to be someone who had access to the house. There were no broken locks, no forced windows, no trace of entry. Whoever, or whatever, it was, had a key. I checked out of that hotel a day early and drove straight home. Even now, months later, I still get chills when I hear that faint click sound, someone pressing their tongue against the roof of their mouth. And sometimes, late at night when I'm about to fall asleep, I swear I can hear it again. My wife Cheryl and I have been together for 10 years, married for 2, and we just bought our first house less than a month ago. Things, however, couldn't have started on a worse note. We moved to a small inland town in Georgia called Was. That's all the detail I'm giving, just in case. Our new home sits on a quiet street with a large property that faces a thick patch of woods. That was one of the main reasons we bought it. We imagined adopting a dog, raising kids, and letting them play freely in that big backyard. We both work similar hours. I get home around 5, Cheryl around 6. The first 2 nights went perfectly fine. It was the weekend, and we spent both days unpacking boxes and getting used to the creaks and corners of the house. Everything felt right. Safe. Normal. Then came Monday night. We had just gone to bed, lights out for maybe 20 minutes, when a sound jolted us both awake. Music, loud, coming from somewhere outside. The next evening, Cheryl and I tried to put the whole thing behind us. We told ourselves it must have been some stupid prank. Maybe kids trying to mess with the new couple in town. Still, when night came, there was this quiet tension between us. We both knew what we were afraid might happen again. It was just after midnight when the silence of our bedroom was broken once more. The same eerie, crackling sound drifted through the walls. Only this time, the song was different. It was Tiptoe Through the Tulips. You've heard it before, the kind of old, warbled tune that might have sounded cheerful decades ago, but now just sounds wrong. The moment it started, Cheryl sat upright in bed, wide-eyed. "It's happening again," she whispered. My heart sank. The volume was louder than the night before. I opened the curtains, and the dim moonlight revealed something on the grass. It wasn't moving, but it caught my attention immediately, a small object resting right in the center of our yard. "I'm going out there," I told Cheryl. "Don't," she said, her voice trembling. "Let's call the cops first." But I didn't want to look weak, not in front of my wife, not in our new home. I wanted to show that I could handle it. So I grabbed a flashlight and headed downstairs. The song was still playing when I opened the back door, echoing through the cool Georgia air. As I stepped onto the lawn, the music seemed to pull me closer to the object. When I got near enough to see clearly, my stomach turned. It was an old, beat-up radio. The sound was coming from its tiny, rusted speaker, the dial glowing faintly in the dark. I reached down, turned it off, and looked up at the bedroom window where Cheryl was watching. "It's just a radio," I yelled. "Someone must have left it here." But instead of calming down, she suddenly started screaming my name. "Run, Daniel, run." Her voice cracked with terror. My heart froze. I spun around toward the woods, and that's when I saw them. 3 figures, standing perfectly still among the trees, evenly spaced apart, each facing directly toward me. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They just stood there, like shadows watching from the edge of the light. Holy, I didn't even finish the thought. I bolted. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, straight back to the house, slamming the door behind me and locking it. Upstairs, Cheryl was crying uncontrollably. I grabbed my phone and called 911 with shaking hands, trying to explain what we'd just seen. The dispatcher sent a unit right away. While we waited, every creak of the house made us flinch. We expected a knock on the door at any second, or worse, the sound of that music again. When the police finally arrived, we rushed outside to meet them. Cheryl and I pointed toward the woods, telling them everything. They searched with their flashlights, their beams cutting through the darkness, but found nothing. I showed them the old radio still lying in the grass. They bagged it up, said they'd check it for prints. Then they told us they'd patrol the area for the night, just in case. When they left, the silence felt unbearable. The woods behind our house looked endless. That was the night we realized, whatever was out there didn't just want to scare us. It wanted to be seen. For the next few days, Cheryl and I lived in constant tension. Every sound made us jump. The wind brushing the trees, a floorboard creaking, even the hum of the refrigerator. Sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, it came in short bursts filled with uneasy dreams. We talked about moving out, but we just bought the house. We couldn't afford to walk away. So instead, we tried to convince ourselves it was over. Maybe whoever did it got bored once the cops showed up. Maybe it really was some local prankster who thought it would be funny to scare the newcomers. But deep down, neither of us believed that. By Wednesday night, we finally started to feel a small sense of normalcy returning. We cooked dinner together, watched a movie, and tried to laugh a little. The house felt almost warm again, like it had before all this started. That night, we went to bed around 11. Cheryl fell asleep almost immediately, but I stayed awake scrolling through my phone. I remember looking over at her peaceful face, feeling guilty that she'd been dragged into something so disturbing. I eventually dozed off, but it didn't last long. At exactly 2:37 a.m., I woke up with a start. The sound that had haunted us for days was back, but this time, it wasn't music. It was something softer. A humming. It was faint, like someone standing just outside the window whispering a tune under their breath. I froze. Every hair on my body stood up. Cheryl stirred beside me and whispered, "Do you hear that?" I nodded slowly. We both sat there, listening. It wasn't coming from the woods this time. It was closer. Much closer. Without turning on the light, I slipped out of bed and crept toward the window. The curtains were slightly open. I leaned forward just enough to peek through the narrow gap. What I saw made my stomach twist. Someone was standing in our yard again, just one person this time. Their back was to the house, facing the woods. They weren't moving, just standing completely still, their head tilted upward as they softly hummed that eerie tune. I couldn't see their face, but the outline of their shoulders and the strange angle of their neck were enough to chill me to the core. Cheryl whispered, "Daniel, please don't go outside." I didn't. Not this time. I just watched, frozen in place, as the person took a slow step forward into the darkness of the trees and vanished. The humming stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. I closed the curtains, locked every door and window, and sat awake until the sun came up. We both agreed that morning it was time to install cameras. We needed proof of what was happening. But deep down, we knew we didn't need proof. We already knew the truth. Someone, or something, was watching us. And they knew exactly where we lived. 2 nights later, I woke to the sound of music again. Not faint this time, loud. The same old crackling tune, "Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf?" echoing through the trees as if the woods themselves were singing. Cheryl sat up instantly, eyes wide. "No," she whispered. "Not again." I jumped out of bed, grabbed the flashlight, and checked the backyard through the window. The light from the motion sensor flicked on, and there it was. The same vintage radio, sitting right in the middle of the lawn. Its tinny speaker blared that warped melody, distorted and wrong, like a broken carnival record. My pulse hammered as I ran downstairs. Cheryl screamed after me not to go, but I couldn't stand another night of being terrified in my own house. I flung open the back door and stepped out onto the cold grass. The air smelled of rain and earth. The trees swayed like shadows shifting under a moonless sky. I walked toward the radio, each step crunching softly. When I got close, I reached down and switched it off. Silence fell instantly, deep, suffocating silence. I lifted the radio by its handle and turned toward the house. Cheryl was at the window, crying, mouthing something I couldn't hear. Then her face changed. Her expression went from fear to pure horror. She started screaming my name, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. I froze. She pointed behind me, still screaming. I turned around slowly, and there they were. 3 figures, just beyond the edge of the light, standing in the open, perfectly still. They weren't moving. They weren't talking. Just standing there, 6 feet apart, facing me. Their shapes were blurry in the dark, but I could see the outline of faces, pale, unnatural, like masks. My instincts finally kicked in. I dropped the radio and sprinted for the door, slamming it shut behind me. My chest felt like it was going to burst. Cheryl grabbed my arm, sobbing. I locked every door and window while she dialed 911. The police came within minutes. 2 officers with flashlights combing the woods and the yard. They didn't find anyone, just footprints in the wet grass that led toward the trees and disappeared into the darkness. They took the radio for prints, told us to stay somewhere else for the night. We packed a few bags and drove to a motel on the other side of town, too shaken to speak. Cheryl cried quietly the whole drive. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights following us. Or worse, someone walking along the road behind us. It's been 3 weeks since that night. We haven't gone back to the house except once, to grab the rest of our things. The woods were still. The yard was empty. But on the porch, right by the door, sat a small speaker. It was playing softly. The same song. Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf? I've worked as a nurse in several hospitals over the years, but none have stayed with me the way this one did. Before my current job, I worked at a geriatric hospital about 30 minutes from my home. I had experience with older patients before, so this position didn't seem any different at first. I had only been there for a couple of weeks when it happened. It was my second to last shift, though I didn't know that yet. I was working the graveyard shift, running on almost no sleep, and I had been assigned to the Alzheimer's ward. The residents there adored me, maybe because I was in my 20s, a young face among those drifting between the present and their fading memories. I think they saw me as a reminder of the real world, something that tethered them to the now. When someone is left alone with their thoughts for too long, their mind drifts to strange places. I learned that quickly. Most of my patients that night were quiet, but one woman stood out. Her name was Lena. It was my first night caring for her, and from the moment I stepped into her room, she seemed uneasy. She kept telling me about voices she heard and a man dressed in black who stood in the corner watching her. Her roommate had already requested that her curtain be closed before my shift started. She was kind but tired of Lena's fear. Lena's eyes followed every shadow, her hands shaking as she whispered that he was there again. I tried to comfort her, reminding her she wasn't alone, that I was just a call away. Eventually, after a few minutes of soft talking, she relaxed. The next time I checked on her, she was asleep. The ward was silent by midnight. The kind of silence that feels heavy. Time crawled slower than usual, the kind of quiet where even the faint hum of a vent feels too loud. That's when the night began to twist into something I still can't explain. Around 2 a.m., I went into the linen room to restock my cart. The room was small, dimly lit, and completely silent. I had shut the door behind me to keep from disturbing the patients. As I folded the linens, I suddenly heard something faint, a soft shuffle that didn't sound like it came from me. I froze, listening. Nothing. Just the low hum of the overhead light. I shook it off, blaming my tired mind, and went back to stacking sheets. Then it happened. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Firm. Cold. Real. For a split second, it pressed down hard, like someone trying to get my attention. My heart stopped. I gasped, spun around so fast I almost fell. No one was there. The room was empty. My breath came fast and uneven. The air felt heavier than before, like something invisible was standing right behind me. I bolted out into the hallway, poking my head out to see if any other nurses were around. The corridor was silent. Not a single sound. I told myself I was imagining things. Just another side effect of too little sleep and too many long nights. Still shaking, I went back inside and forced myself to finish stocking. I placed the last folded sheet on the cart, turned toward the door, and froze. Through the glass window of the door, I saw him. A man, dressed completely in black. He stood motionless, watching me. Then his lips curved into a slow, unnatural smile. Before I could even scream, he vanished. The scream tore out of me before I even realized it. I dropped to the floor, clutching my chest as my heart felt like it might explode. My cries echoed through the empty ward, loud enough to wake the entire floor. Seconds later, the door burst open and one of the night nurses rushed in, eyes wide. "What happened?" she asked, helping me up. I was trembling so badly I could barely speak. "Did you see him?" "The man, he was right there, dressed in black." Her confused stare made my blood run cold. "What man?" "There's no one else here." She stepped into the hallway, scanning both directions. The long corridor was completely empty. Together, we checked every room in the ward. Nothing. No trace of anyone who didn't belong there. But when we passed Lena's room, she was awake, sitting upright, shaking, staring toward the corner. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "He's back. The man in black. He's watching again." I went closer, still shaken. "Lena, what does he look like? Is he smiling?" The question made her expression shift from fear to confusion. Her eyes focused on mine in a way they never had before, her mind suddenly sharp. "How did you know that?" she asked softly. My breath caught in my throat. My stomach dropped. Before I could answer, she started to scream, high-pitched, terrified. "Get me out of here. He's coming. He's coming." Her cries filled the hall, summoning the other nurses. They rushed in, trying to calm her, but she was hysterical. I just stood there, numb, my hands shaking as I backed away from the room. Because I knew what she'd seen. It was the same man who had smiled at me through that glass. After Lena's breakdown, the head nurse decided to move me to another ward for the rest of the night. I didn't argue. I couldn't stay in that hallway a second longer. My hands were still trembling, my pulse refusing to calm down. Every sound, every flicker of shadow made me jump. I tried to focus on the new patients, but my mind kept flashing back to that smile, the hollow look in his eyes through the glass. And worse, how Lena's terrified screams echoed the same fear I had felt moments before. Around 4 a.m., I told the supervisor I wasn't feeling well and asked to leave early. She agreed, probably noticing how pale I looked. I didn't even change out of my scrubs. I just grabbed my things and left. The parking lot was empty under the flickering lights. The night air felt heavy, almost electric, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me from the hospital windows. When I got home, I locked every door, every window, and sat on the couch until sunrise, unable to sleep. The next morning, I texted the head nurse and told her my next shift would be my last. I explained that the experience had shaken me too much to keep working there. She was kind about it, understanding, but I could tell she didn't fully believe me. I don't blame her. I wouldn't have believed it either. I've never had hallucinations. I've never seen things that weren't there. But I felt that hand on my shoulder. I saw that man smiling at me through the glass. And what haunts me most is knowing that Lena, someone whose mind wandered between reality and memory, described him exactly as I saw him. Sometimes I tell myself it was just exhaustion. But other nights, when I'm working a late shift at my new hospital and the halls go quiet, I swear I can feel that same cold hand resting on my shoulder again. It was a night like any other. I had just clocked out of work around midnight and was heading home, taking my usual quiet route through town. It was a warm midsummer night, about 75 degrees, and I had the top of my convertible down to enjoy the breeze. The roads were empty, and all I could hear was the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the soft sounds of crickets echoing from the woods that lined both sides of the road. On one side, there was a cornfield stretching into darkness. On the other, a thick patch of trees that swallowed most of the moonlight. I was doing around 50 when I suddenly heard it, a blood-curdling scream. A woman's scream. Sharp, terrified, and so real that my stomach dropped instantly. I hit the brakes hard. The tires screeched against the pavement as the car came to a stop. For a second, everything went still except for the pounding of my heartbeat in my ears. Then I heard it again, the same voice, crying out for help. This time, it was clearer. It came from the left, deep within the woods. Without thinking, I reached into my back seat and grabbed the baton I always kept there for protection. The air was heavy and still as I stepped out of the car, calling out, "Who's out there?" Almost immediately, a woman's trembling voice called back, "Please, help me." Every instinct in me screamed to go, to run into those trees and help her. So I did. I started toward the woods, pushing branches out of my way, my flashlight beam slicing through the dark. "Keep screaming," I yelled, "so I can find you." Every few seconds, she'd scream again, "Help," and I'd sprint in that direction. But as I got deeper into the woods, something strange began to happen. The screams weren't getting louder. They weren't even changing direction. It was like she was always the same distance away, no matter how fast I ran. My chest tightened. This didn't make sense. I stopped and listened, heart hammering. Then I shouted, "Tell me where you are." There was silence for a few seconds. Then, that same desperate voice screamed again, "Help." But it still sounded exactly as far away as before. That was when something in my gut flipped. This wasn't right. I wasn't chasing someone in trouble. I was being led somewhere. The night had gone from calm to nightmare in a matter of seconds. The woman's voice, sharp and desperate, cut through the trees like it was echoing from every direction at once. My flashlight beam danced across branches and empty trunks, never landing on a face, never catching movement. Yet that cry for help kept repeating, always the same tone, the same distance. I started running harder, pushing deeper into the woods. "Keep screaming," I yelled again, breathing heavy, my shoes snapping twigs underfoot. Each time she called out, I adjusted my path, chasing the sound that never seemed to grow closer. The woods felt endless, like I was running in circles. After another minute, I stopped dead in my tracks, chest heaving. The air was thick, unmoving. "Where are you?" I shouted, my voice trembling now. For a few seconds, nothing. Then, right on cue, that same voice echoed again, "Help me." But this time, it didn't sound right. The pitch was the same, the distance the same, almost too identical, like someone was pressing play on a recording over and over. That realization sent a chill through my entire body. My instincts screamed at me to leave. I turned and sprinted back the way I came, twigs snapping underfoot, my flashlight cutting through the blackness. My only focus now was the faint glow of my car's headlights, flickering between the trees in the distance. But the sound, it followed me. The cries for help came again and again, still just as far away, as though the voice was chasing me instead of me chasing it. Each scream felt more deliberate, more mocking. I didn't look back. My pulse was pounding in my ears, and my lungs burned as I tore through the last stretch of brush. Finally, I broke through the tree line and stumbled into the open, the car waiting where I left it. I could still hear her. "Help me." The voice was calm now, almost curious. I jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door shut, and locked it. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. The headlights illuminated the edge of the woods, but there was nothing there. Just trees. I pressed my foot down hard on the gas and didn't slow until those woods disappeared from my rearview mirror. I didn't stop driving until I reached the next town over. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and sat there for a minute, trying to catch my breath. The woman's screams still echoed faintly in my head, replaying over and over like some distorted recording I couldn't turn off. After a few minutes, I grabbed my phone and called 911. My voice shook as I told the dispatcher everything. The screams, the woods, how I tried to find her but couldn't. The dispatcher stayed calm, asked for the location, and said officers would be sent to check it out. I told her I wasn't going back there. Not in the dark. She said that was fine, that I'd done the right thing by reporting it. But even after hanging up, I didn't feel any relief. I kept imagining that woman's voice calling out from the darkness, wondering if she was still out there, if maybe I'd just been too late to help. When I finally got home, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in my house made me flinch. I left the lights on and sat on the couch, staring out the window toward the tree line behind my property. I thought I saw movement once, a shadow between the trees, but maybe it was just my mind still playing tricks. The next morning, I checked my phone for missed calls. Nothing. No follow-up from the police, no news alert. It was as if the night before hadn't happened. I tried to convince myself it was just a hallucination, maybe some strange echo or prank. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The screams had been too real. The The voice had been too human. And the way it had followed me through the woods, that wasn't something an echo could do. For the next few days, I kept checking local news sites, half expecting to see something about a missing woman or a search in those woods. But there was nothing. Just silence. Until a week later. A week later, I was sitting on my couch, trying to push that night out of my mind when a breaking news headline flashed across the TV. My stomach dropped the second I read it. Body of local woman found in woods outside town. The report said a man hiking with his dog had discovered the remains of a woman in her 30s. Authorities confirmed there were no signs of foul play. The words hit me like ice water. No foul play? Then what happened to her? As the reporter spoke, an image of the woods appeared on the screen. My blood ran cold. I recognized that road, that exact stretch of trees. It was the same place I had heard the screams. The news anchor continued, saying police believed the body had been there for several days before it was found. Several days. That meant she had likely already been dead the night I heard her voice crying for help. I sat frozen, staring at the screen, my thoughts spinning. If she was already dead, then who, or what, was screaming that night? The sound of her voice still rang in my memory, desperate, human, real. I could still hear her cries echoing through the darkness, always the same distance away. Was it her spirit calling out? Or something else pretending to be her? I don't drive that road anymore. I take the long way home, even if it adds half an hour to my commute. And I've stopped going out at night altogether. Because whenever I pass by that stretch of trees in daylight, I swear I can still feel something watching me from the shadows, waiting for someone else to stop and listen.